Welcome back to the Foodpocalypse Now podcast. I'm Chris Baker from Foodpocalypse Now, welcoming you back and welcoming myself back. It's been a hot minute since I've done the podcast, but just trying to step back. I kind of jumped into the videos for the Snack Attack series, and I've got a lot of other things planned, but kind of felt like I was rushing into things and not really taking my time to kind of plot things out. And of course, took a break to come up with some ideas and see really where I want this podcast to go, and kind of have an idea. As much as I'm kind of a fly by the seat of my pants guy, so no matter how much I plot and plan, it all really boils down to when I get in the moment what I'm actually going to do. And of course, Foodpocalypse Now's podcast, a revelation of all things Foodpocalypse Now. We're going to talk about food, but we're going to talk about other things. And one of the things I wanted to talk about in this podcast is my mother-in-law had a birthday the other day. And my wife came to me. She's like, I made a cheesecake for her back in November. And I made a pumpkin cheesecake. And I'd never made a cheesecake before. I haven't done a lot of baking in a long time. And it was kind of the first chance to really get back into doing some baking. I'm not by any stretch of the imagination a chef or a baker, but I like to do those things at home on a small scale and enjoyed that. So I made her a pumpkin cheesecake. I found a recipe that I liked and dove into it, and it actually turned out pretty good. Other than the huge gaping crack down the middle, it was like the Grand Canyon in the middle of this cheesecake. But we'll get to that a little bit later. But she loved it and asked me if I would make a cheesecake for her mom for Mother's Day / birthday. They're days apart, so it was kind of a combination of both. So again, I set out to find another recipe that I thought looked good. Like I said, I have only made one cheesecake, so I didn't have a recipe on hand, but I think I found a pretty good classic cheesecake recipe. I kind of searched the internet, did some searches, and found one. And you can find this. I posted this on the Facebook page for Foodpocalypse Now, and I've also got the link to it there. So you can check it out, but check out sallysbakingaddiction.com and just look up her classic cheesecake recipe. And it's got all the classic components, cream cheese, a little bit of sour cream, sugar, some vanilla extract, lemon juice, and eggs. I know some people call for a little bit of flour in as a binding agent, but this didn't call for it, and I don't think it needed it because for me and everyone that's had it so far, it was perfect the way it was. But made this cheesecake, and one of the mistakes I found I made, a couple big mistakes in my first cheesecake attempt that I tried to rectify in this one is one, overmixing. I wanted to make sure this was blended and smooth the first time I made a cheesecake for my wife, and I may have, but most definitely did overmix the cheesecake. The other thing I did wrong, and it really wasn't my fault. I mean, I knew that some people called for a water bath when they do cheesecakes, but the recipe I had for the pumpkin cheesecake did not call for a water bath, so I did not use one. And of course, I paid the price because there was a huge crack down the middle of that delicious cheesecake. So while it tasted fantastic when I made that back in November, it was a sight to be seen with that huge gaping crack down the middle of it. But I learned my lesson, which is what you got to do when it comes to baking and cooking. You got to learn your lesson and don't repeat mistakes. That's a life lesson as well, not just cooking and baking. But at any rate, I decided I'm going to do a water bath. The recipe called for a water bath. Whether it did or not, I was going to do a water bath. And a lot of recipes call for wrapping your springform pan with tin foil, aluminum foil. And I thought that's great, but everyone I've talked to that's done that, it's kind of hit or miss whether water's going to seep in. And I didn't want to take any chances. So actually, my mother-in-law got this for my brother-in-law back in Christmas last year. And I can't remember if he said he used it or not yet. But it seemed like a great idea. It seemed like a solid way to keep water from getting into your springform pan when you're doing a cheesecake water bath. It's a easy bath cheesecake wrap. I think there's a couple different types there, but that's the one I used. I purchased that, put this springform pan into that, put that down in the water bath, filled up water. Perfect. No water got into the springform pan, and the water bath saved the day because there were no cracks in this cheesecake that I made for my mother-in-law. And we just did a simple cheesecake. She'll eat some of the crazier, but she doesn't like a lot of fruit and nonsense going on. She's old school. She likes just a plain piece of cheesecake, maybe with a little. I decided I was going to make a raspberry sauce to drizzle over top of this the pieces of cheesecake. I wanted to leave it pristine in case anybody wanted just a regular piece of cheesecake, but I made this raspberry sauce. Again, checked out recipes online. I had made one years ago, and it turned out really well, but I never saved the recipe. I've got a bad habit of that, not finding recipes and not saving them. But I found one that was comparable. And of all places, Taste of Home had it, and it was very simple raspberry sauce. It's just fresh raspberries or frozen raspberries like I used. Water, about a cup and three quarters of water, some sugar, 3/4 cup. Probably could have used a little bit more sugar, and a couple tablespoons of cornstarch that you mix with water and kind of use as a thickener. But that recipe also is on the Facebook page, the Foodpocalypse Now Facebook page, where I posted about this cheesecake. It's in the comments. You can click on the Taste of Home link there and check out this. But great sauce. It could have used a little bit more sugar. My wife thought it was just at times a little too tart. I like a little tartness, especially like on a cheesecake, because it kind of cuts through all the richness of the cream cheese and the sugar. And I didn't mind that it was a little tart. Now that it is, it makes a good 2 cups worth. And I've got it in the refrigerator, waiting to use on some ice cream or something like that once we finish all of the cheesecake. But as it sit there over the past few days, it seems to have mellowed out in the tartness a little bit. So if you want to make it early and then kind of use it if you're not big on tartness, or like I said, you could have added a little bit more sugar, and that may have helped maybe make it not so tart. But like I said, I like the tartness. I like how it kind of cut through the richness of the cheesecake. And for all intents and purposes, this cheesecake I made for my mother-in-law's Mother's Day / birthday was a huge success. And as I said, we've got the links to the recipes on the Facebook page. So go check out Foodpocalypse Now on Facebook and scroll down until you get the cheesecake recipe. There's pictures, and in the comments, the recipes for both the cheesecake and the raspberry sauce that I used for the cheesecake as well. And you know what? That kind of really, there's no great segue into what we're going to talk about next, other than it's kind of this past week, while I'm making cheesecake for my mother-in-law, I discovered a new show. Not a new show. Actually, the show's been out for a little while, and it's a show I've wanted to watch. We got HBO Max here not too long ago because the new Godzilla movie was coming out on that, and something else was coming out on that. I can't think of what it was. But, well, we've got HBO Max. I decided, there's some things I want to watch that were on there. And one of the things, I'm a huge Stephen King fan. Love Stephen King. I've not read all his books, but I'm working on it. I'm trying to get back into reading more. I used to read all the time, and just, life and whatnot. I just kind of haven't taken the time to read as much as I would like. So I'm getting back into reading. And this has kind of prompted that, because they have that limited series, a mini series called The Outsider on HBO. And if you've watched it, you know how good. It's classic Stephen King. It really is. If you haven't watched it, this is going to be full of. I'll try not to be too spoilery, but there's going to be some spoilers, I'm sure, because I just can't control myself. So if you haven't watched it, you may want to, I don't know, fast forward to the end or something. But at any rate, it's something you're going to watch, whether I spoil it for you or not. I spoil things for myself all the time, looking things up on Wikipedia, watching reaction videos and things like that. Spoil things all the time, and if it's good enough, I'm not going to care. I'm not going to care whether it was spoiled for me. Now, there's some things where I do not want to be spoiled, and I stay away from things like that, but Sometimes I'm my own worst enemy when it comes to spoiling things. But I did not spoil anything for myself with The Outsider, because it was one of those books from Stephen King that I had not read yet, and I liked how it looked. It looked at, yeah, kind of had that classic, very ominous, eerie feel to the trailers and things like that. And Jason Bateman's in it, and I've always liked the things that he's been in. I'm not going to go and say I'm the biggest Jason Bateman fan or a huge fan of his, but I enjoy a lot of things. I'm looking forward to Ozark on Netflix. He's in that, and I'm looking forward to watching that. I've kind of put that off for far too long and realized that, I need to check out this show. But at any rate, The Outsider, what a fantastic. If you like horror, if you like Stephen King, it's such a great story. And it's so classic Stephen King, because it's, you've got all these people doing different things, and then they all kind of mesh up together at the end to form this group to fight the monster. And it's just a very classic way of Stephen King develops stories. And it's such a sad, it's kind of got a sad tone to it, because people, in any Stephen King story, somebody's going to die. And some people die in this some you think are going to die, some you don't think are going to die. And like I said, I'm not going to give anything away there, but really enjoyed this because it brings back a character that he has used in some of his other stories, especially the Mr. Mercedes movies, right? Not movies, but the books and the TV show. Holly Gibney is a big character in those Mr. Mercedes books and that whole storyline. And she was actually portrayed in the Mr. Mercedes show by Justine Loop. And I thought she did such a fantastic job. It really embodied what I understood of this character and who this character was. And she really set the bar quite high for my expectations of who Holly Gibney was going to be. Now, suffice it to say that when you watch The Outsider, it is a completely different actress playing the Holly Gibney role. And at first I was like, I've got this image in my head. I've got this actress who portrayed the character much to how I pictured the character when I read the books. And the actress who plays Holly Gibney in The Outsider is quite different. Cynthia Erivo, I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that correctly. I apologize if I'm not. But the more I watched her and the more I got to see her as this character, she did such a fantastic job. She really embodied a lot of the quirks, because the Holly Gibney character she's savant. She's kind of on the spectrum. She's OCD. She just has all these characteristics about her that make her character unique, and not something you see a ton of in horror movies, let alone in TV shows in general. And Justine played that so well. I was afraid, it was going to come across as like a caricature, but Cynthia Erivo did a spectacular job with the character. Very much, it was very much akin to what Justine Loop did with the Mr. Mercedes Finders Keepers and Watch, those novels, that trilogy of novels, what she did with that show. And Cynthia Erivo, like, again, hopefully I'm pronouncing that correctly, but she did a spectacular job. And that character, the Holly Gibney character, she brought it to life again on the screen, and was really one of my favorite parts of this Outsider miniseries. And so check it out. It's such a spectacular, it's just a miniseries. It's one of those where at the end of a Stephen King novel, I just always feel like I wish this story could keep going, because he writes such fantastic characters and such fantastic circumstances with which these characters are in, that you just don't want it to end. And that's kind of how it was with this show. And any good Stephen King, whether it's a miniseries, whether it's a television series, whether it's a movie, you just don't want it to end. And but unfortunately, because of the way, like I said, Stephen King, somebody's dying. It really couldn't go on. I think there's probably room for a sequel. if Stephen King writes one. I don't think they're going to do another miniseries that's not based on a Stephen King book, because Stephen King was pretty hands-on, from what I understand, in the making of the Outsider miniseries for HBO. But there's room. I think there's room for a sequel, and I would welcome that. Bringing back the Holly Gibney character, bringing back this, this entity that is causing such problems in the town that they're in. But what I'm looking forward to more is to see Stephen King and HBO doing more things together. I really hope that Stephen King and HBO come up with some other ways to present some of his stories, because I think that's the best way to do Stephen King. I love a good Stephen King movie, but Stephen King movies always seem to fall short because I don't think Stephen King's usually involved as much or as hands-on, and you get directors that kind of want to do their own thing. That was the problem I had with It. The director did a great job casting. The cast, whether it's the kids or the adult versions of the kids, was just spot on. Pennywise, Bill Skarsgård did a spectacular job as Pennywise, but there were just aspects of the movie that just weren't in the book, and that kind of bothers me. So, you get that a lot with Stephen King movies, and sometimes the movies are just too short to encapsulate everything that these rich worlds Stephen King's and these rich characters that Stephen King creates. It's kind of hard to fit it all into an hour and a half, 2 hour, even a 3 hour movie. So I think, doing a show or even better, some of these miniseries, some of the miniseries that he's done for like ABC, like The Stand and The Shining, were some great examples of how Stephen King's work is better suited for the miniseries format. And with HBO, it's kind of no holds barred. You can get as gory as you want. You can have people dropping the F-bomb. I know, some people may be averse to that, but in Stephen King's books, the language can be a little salty. And sometimes you just gotta hike up your big girl pants and just deal with it. But with HBO, you get the freedom that you don't get with network television and all the, censorship that goes on there and the standards and practices that go on in network television. So I really think HBO and Stephen King, they've got the makings of a great relationship, and I'm really kind of excited. Netflix as well. Some of the things that I've seen, like Gerald's Game on Netflix, 1922, I believe, was on there. The one with Thomas Jane. And also the one he did with his son, Joe Hill, The Tall Grass. Netflix is a great vehicle for Stephen King's work, and I'm really hoping to see more work with him and HBO and Netflix as well, because I think there's just so much room for great adaptations of Stephen King's work, which like I said, I'm a huge fan of. And of course, watching The Outsider made me realize that, I haven't read Stephen King in a long time, and I've never read this book. I never read The Outsider, and it made me decide that, what, I'm gonna try to get back into reading. So I went to Amazon and purchased The Outsider in novel form, and started reading that this weekend. So I'm really kind of excited about, one, seeing how close the miniseries is to the book, because I'm a bit of a purist when it comes to Stephen King's work. I want to see a fair and mostly accurate representation. I understand, artistic license, and you can't do everything in a show that you can in the book, but I want to see the adaptation on the screen. I want it to match up as close as it can to the book that I read, the book that I fell in love with. I've seen so many books from Stephen King, just the movie adaptations, just like that new version of Pet Sematary was just an abomination. I know there's a bunch of people out there that just love it. They think it's the greatest thing since sliced bread. I'm like, seriously? Do you even like Stephen King? Because that was not the book, and I want to see the book. Now, I know the Dale Midkiff one from back in the 90s with Fred Gwynn, that Pet Sematary was pretty accurate. There again, it just wasn't long enough. There just wasn't enough real estate to bring Stephen King's whole world onto that big screen. So it was good, but it wasn't as great as it could have been. And, that's one of those instances where, the movies just don't live up to the book. And that's the problem I have with a lot of Stephen King adaptations, especially for movies. But there again, like I said, HBO did a fantastic job with The Outsider, and I'm excited to finish the Outsider book and see, just how close they got to the source material. It's one of those things where, when I read the book first, it sets such a high bar that I don't know if there are very many movies or miniseries or TV shows that can live up to it. Sometimes there are. I thought the Stephen King, The Shining, that he did for ABC with Steven Weber and Rebecca De Mornay, that was as close to the book as you could get. It was so far, it was so not the Stanley Kubrick Shining. Stanley Kubrick Shining was just a veiled, adaptation. It was so not the book. I mean, it had a lot of the same tropes as the book, a lot of the same, characters and things that happened, but it just, in so many regards, it was not the book. And I think that's why Stephen King has always kind of had a problem with it, whether he admits it from time to time or not. But that version of The Shining, that ABC miniseries, was spot on. And that was one of the rare cases where I read the book and a on-screen version of it kind of lived up to what I loved about the book. But a lot of times I read the book and I watch the movie and I always end up a little disappointed. Now, there are some cases like this where I haven't read the book yet. I've seen this adaptation and I enjoyed the adaptation. So I'm hoping that once I read the book, I'm not going back and say, oh, I wish they would have done this because this was in the book and they didn't even touch it. I don't think so. I think this was probably fairly faithful to the source material. Like I said, I think Stephen King was much involved with this adaptation of The Outsider. But like I said, I'm really excited to find out how that all plays out. And once I finish the book, I'll probably do another podcast where I blather on about Stephen King and books versus adaptations. But I promise I won't do that to you every time. Sometimes, but not every time. But check it out. If you haven't seen The Outsider on HBO Max, definitely worth it. They got a lot of great shows on there. Definitely worth picking up and checking out. My wife and I have been watching The Nevers, which I don't know if very many people have checked this out yet, but we've just both fallen in love with the show. Such a great world. I know Joss Whedon came up with it, and he's kind of in hot water these days. I'm not going to get into that. But if you like good stories, I think it's a good story. It's got interesting characters, and it's one of those things where extraordinary characters and extraordinary circumstances always makes for a compelling show to me. And that's what you get with The Nevers. So really excited. Maybe we'll do a podcast once the finale. I think the finale is this weekend, and we'll kind of go over my thoughts on that show. There again, Foodpocalypse Now podcast is a revelation of all things Foodpocalypse Now. Not just food, but the other things foodies like, other things I like, books, TV, music, God knows what. I'm going to talk about it all right here. So I want to thank everyone for tuning in. Check us out on our website, foodpocalypsenow.com. You can also check us out on Facebook, Instagram, and of course, we've got the podcast as well on Spotify and other places. We always put it on YouTube as well. Check out our YouTube channel because we've got the Snack Attack video series and working on some other things, working on other different types of podcasts, working on some other ideas for things to present on the YouTube channel as well. And please go like all those platforms, like our stuff on there, share them, and get the word out because we're not doing this to get rich and famous. We're doing it because we love it and loving sharing, the things we love, food and all the things that, like I said, foodies like. We don't. I've always said that foodies don't just sit around looking at pictures of food all day. We like other things as well. And if I can tie food and the other things I love together and present that to you, hopefully you enjoy that. So thanks for listening. Check us out on our website, foodpocalypsenow.com, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, all those other places. Like, share, And until next time, have a great one.